Hey, MBA hopefuls, and welcome to MBA Waves. Happy 2023. This is our first episode in the new year. My name is Eric Lucrezia, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Bara Sapir. How you doing, Bara?
I'm great. It's good to see you, Eric. Happy New Year, and Happy New Year to all of our guests and to our LinkedIn and Facebook visitors.
Yes, and super excited about our rebrand. What do you think about the new website?
I'm so loving it. I feel like it had the aspects that we loved with the rainbow and the movement and the waves, and so I'm pretty excited to start the new year with a new branding and a new look.
I think it looks great. I'm super happy with our graphic designer, Andrea, who did all that. Thank you, Andrea. So this week's episode of MBA Waves, we are talking about MBA fairs and how to stand out as a top applicant, ways to get the most out of the event, and some tips to really look and sound your best in front of all the recruiters and adcoms. So without further ado, let's introduce our guests. We'll go around the room, and each of you can say who you are, where you're at, and what company you're with. So why don't we start with Scott? He's the first time I'm seeing Scott. How you doing, Scott?
Nice to see you all. Happy to be here, and Happy New Year to everybody as well. Hope 2023 is a wonderful year for all you folks. So Scott Stewart, I'm the founder and CEO of Target Test Prep. This afternoon, I'm in Miami. Of course, TTP does, top test prep for the GMAT, GRE, EA, basically help people get top GMAT, GRE, EA scores.
Nice. Thanks, Scott. And Maria, how are you?
I am doing well. Hi, everyone from uncommonly rainy Los Angeles. I am Maria Wich-Vila, the founder of ApplicantLab.com. It is an online alternative to expensive admissions consulting. So it's a step-by-step platform that walks you through all the same advice that I would walk you through, given my now almost 20 years of admissions experience. But it's an automated platform, so it saves you time, money, and it's available 24/7.
Amazing. Thanks, Maria. And of course, Krithika, who's been joining us for a while now. How you doing, Krithika?
Hey everyone, I'm doing great, and here's to our very first episode of 2023. Looking forward to it. I'm dialing in from India, and I am co-founder at Career Labs, where we help you with anything related to careers, and especially with your MBA applications.
Thanks, Krithika. So to all our guests, we'll give you guys priority to answer first, but really any of these questions or talking points are fair game, and just feel free to chime in. And if there's something that comes up in mid-thought, feel free to share. It was a very, very easy flowing on MBA Waves. So to start us off, what are some of the advantages you think of attending an MBA fair? Why go?
Well, I could start. I think, one of the number one things is you get sort of the rare opportunity to perhaps introduce yourself to some of the adcoms or some of the school representatives there. And, a lot of times people say, how can I be memorable? How can I stand out? And, one of the things I tell people at Target Test Prep is I say, you can be helpful to people. And I have a number of really great stories of people who actually helped adcoms fix technology, fix PowerPoint slides. Some of the adcoms were having trouble with their computers, and some of our folks said, "Hey, let me help you." And I just think that's such a great thing to do, genuinely, right? If you could look to help somebody at these fairs, I think that's a wonderful opportunity to stand out in their mind. It could be as simple as maybe the fair's in DC and the person you're speaking to is hungry, and you're a DC native, you know all about DC. You could recommend some restaurants. You could recommend some places to get some coffee. I think people think about being memorable. They're thinking about their resume or the GMAT score, and there's a time and place for all that. But I think the key is sort of building a connection, a one-on-one, a human connection with the people at the other side of the table, so to speak, at these fairs. So the fairs are a great opportunity to do that.
Totally. I mean, that's an interesting tip. I think being of service is a great way to be successful in business anyway, and to make connections, as you said.
I often think about whether it's the fair or even the whole application process. It's almost like speed dating, right? It's almost like going on dates, and exactly what you're talking about, Scott. When you're meeting someone, you are wanting to make that connection, whether it's business, whether it's dating, whether it's friendship, or a hobby, right? So you want to find those points of connection. And so in that sense, it's not only that you're finding out about the school, they're finding out about you, and obviously one person can't represent an entire school, but it is someone that they're bringing on as an ambassador and an envoy. And you're basically your own envoy and ambassador, right? So I often think about fairs as being similar to that process, where it is that dance, it is that process of moving back and forth, and not sizing up in a are we going to spend the rest of our lives together way, but this is a big decision. So what hits are you getting intuitively, and also just straight out information that they're providing for you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Bara. I mean, and as I said, like, no one ever went wrong by lending a hand, by being genuinely interested in the other person. Oh, as you said, Bara, you like dogs, or you have a dog, right? There's just so many ways to genuinely connect with other people. Yeah, of course. There's so many ways to genuinely connect with these folks. I think you can never go wrong.
So for sure, I mean, an MBA fair, the whole concept is to connect people who are considering doing an MBA or a master's program or even a bachelor's program with the schools, right? And in that sense, it is kind of a speed dating matching service. I mean, there's different formats though. But before we get to that, like, the idea is to be able to learn about schools, to make connections, to see where you think you fit in, probably to pick up some brochures, maybe to get your resume or CV looked at and get some feedback on that. There's a lot of good reasons. But speaking of the types of events, like there's a few different formats out there. So you guys joining us tonight, what can you expect from the different kind of formats? What kind of formats have you guys seen? What do you guys know about? And maybe what are some good companies to watch out for? Whoever wants to handle that.
All right, I can take that. So as somebody who has put up booths in some of these fairs from top companies like MBA Tour, Access MBA, and many others, I would say that the events that I have liked the best are the ones where you have targeted research and meeting time. So when I say research, I mean any one-on-one conversations with adcoms that you can book ahead of time, of course, by sending in your LinkedIn profile or even your resume and things like that. And of course, time for meeting the rest of the schools. Because I feel that one of the biggest advantages of these MBA fairs is that you can get to compare many schools at the same time, and you get to meet some of the schools at the same time, so that you get an idea of like how Bara said, should I proceed or not? And many times I often find that people tell me that the interactions they had with alums or how a certain school rep behaved with them made that decision for them, whether they wanted to apply to the school or not.
Maria or Scott, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that the MBA fair, like all things, has evolved. And so like Krithika said, there's now this increased opportunity for you to have one-on-one sessions with admissions officers, which you should absolutely do. Even if you get a time slot for a school that you're frankly not super interested in, first of all, go in with an open mind. You might learn something about a school that you are now suddenly very interested in. But at the very least, it's great practice, right? So because if you do end up embarking upon this journey, you're going to have to interview anyway. So you might as well start getting practice with summarizing your story, your key points. I would arrive to the fair, even if it's just the regular booth kind, with at least sort of a 2 to 3 sentence overview of, hey, my name's Maria and I work for Star TV and I'm interested in MBA because I want to get more into whatever. And so sort of having something like that. So at least that way, you can at least very quickly get across who you are. I actually used to man the booth for HBS years ago before I started Applicant Lab. And so whenever they had an event in LA, I would go and I would help set up the booth and I would set out the little brochures. And I think a lot of it comes down to common sense. I really liked Scott's point about making a human connection. It's not a beauty pageant. It's not like you're going to get 2 seconds in front of me and I want you to twirl the baton and jump through the hoop. And that's really not what it's about. I think especially for the more elite schools, they're not necessarily taking notes or putting down name like, oh, this person was really nice, but this person wasn't so nice. I do think some of the other schools though do like to see it as an indicator of interest. But basically, as I was saying, like, don't hog the person's time. Don't, get 1 or 2 questions in. But if you're at a booth and there are 10 other people there, please just be respectful and yeah, just common sense. Don't try to keep asking like 45 questions about things, because that really can leave a negative impression. And that's the last thing you want, is to take the time out of your day to go to this event and then you end up making a negative impression. Oh no.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
Maria has some great points, and especially about about being prepared. And I think a lot of the success is going to come in the days or the weeks before the fair. As you're learning about the schools and you're saying, geez, where would I be a good fit? My GPA, my background, my GMAT score, all of the things that holistically go into sort of your candidacy. And then looking at all of these factors and researching the school and doing your due diligence, so you know as much as you possibly can about these schools before you go in. And as Maria said, having that elevator pitch pre-planned, which is not easy. I don't know about you folks, but like the 30 seconds of who I am and what I do is always a little elusive to me, at least. So it takes practice. You got to work on it. And she's completely right. Like the people are very busy, right? You don't want to inundate them with questions. But what I have found helpful for people, and I think it's good advice, but it's still, I see it rarely done, is, get their business card or get them to write their email down on your business card or whatever it is. Like, see if you can get their information. And if possible, send a handwritten thank you note. I think that goes back to sort of that genuine connection of being memorable. I mean, look, I don't know what the chances are that an AdCom would remember me or anybody else for that matter, but there's no harm in trying. I mean, the people are there trying to also learn about candidates and say, hey, are there any real impressive people we might like to have? So it never hurts to try to form that interpersonal connection. Maybe someone remembers you. Maybe you send them a handwritten note and said, hey, it was so nice hearing about your dog. Thanks so much for taking the time. I loved hearing about HBS or Stanford or X, Y, and Z. And at the very least, you could send a follow-up email, a thank you email. If you could send a handwritten note, I mean, I always think that adds sort of a touch that's sort of uncommon these days. And, as Maria said, like, even if you weren't interested in school X, Y, or Z, it's great practice to do that one-on-one and perfect your elevator pitch and ask for some feedback. And look, you're either winning or you're learning, right? So even if, it didn't go perfectly, you could learn a little bit about yourself and your presentation skills and what you might do better, when you get to the school that you really love.
I'm a big proponent of the thank you.
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Especially after like interviews or letters of reference. But there was, 2 points that you guys brought up speaking about the like one-to-one format, and one is keep an open mind. That is something that I say so much. A lot of people tend to only focus on the schools that either are local, that they know, or have the biggest reputation, the biggest marketing budget, or high ranked. And yeah, we often say on MBA Waves ranking is not everything, and it's all about fit, really. So keeping an open mind about the schools that you might be with, but secondly, you might be surprised that the school that you is actually a fit after all. And even if it's not, it's great practice for the ones that are. It's just what you guys were saying. I think it's a really important point. But coming back to the original question was about the kinds of formats you might find, and one is like the classic fair where it's sort of like a trade show. Schools have their tables. You can freely circulate around the place and talk with schools at any rate you want. If there's somebody free, you just jump in and talk with them. Versus the one-to-ones, which is, I think Krithika was saying, are more like filtered. They're by appointment. You can't just go and see any school you want to. So it's in that case, it's much more high touch, and you'll be asked by the company that's providing the event to enter a lot of information about yourself, your GMAT score if you have it, but more about the kind of school you're looking for, larger or smaller program, what region of the world. They often get into even as deep as like learning style and areas of interest. You want to focus on finance, on marketing, and so forth. And so it's much more high touch. You'll very likely have to upload your CV or resume, share your LinkedIn profile, and the schools also provide loads of information to get that matching system down so they can make the most of the event. And these events I tend to prefer as well. As a former director of recruitment for ESSEC Business School, it was you knew pretty much who you were going to have in front of you. So as an applicant, it's really important for you to know which kind of event format are you about to attend before you go into it blindly. Are you going to be able to freely talk to anyone, or are you going to have one-on-one appointments? That's kind of the first thing. And some of the key companies, you mentioned, Krithika, a couple of them. You mentioned Access MBA, the MBA Tour. Another big one is QS. And then there's some other smaller companies like Forte, which is based mainly in North America, focusing on women in business, but men are welcome to attend. Another big player in Europe is eFellows. So you can see the various different event companies proposing events, often in the same place. You might have an opportunity to go to more than one. And if you travel, you say you have a business trip to, I don't know, Tokyo, you might be able to hit up an MBA fair there as well and check out some other options for schools. So I wanted to ask the panel, what are some of the main things you want to do in advance to really properly prepare for the event?
I want to hop in because there's one I'm going to answer that, but also don't forget there's also online MBA fairs, right?
Oh.
So that's been a huge shift. I think it started around COVID, and they've gotten pretty sophisticated with these platforms and talking to people, and it's kind of gamified. You can become like a bronze level or gold level. So that's also something interesting. And I also think it's challenging, right? And we can talk later about how do you stand out when it's not even face to face, really, right? It's basically you're just texting with the people that you're talking with. So that's one other thing to be thinking about. It's a huge challenge. And Eric, your question about like how you could prepare in advance, right? That was the question we were at. So, thinking about what kind of fair it is, I think is important. And if there's any speakers or any presenters that are going to be there. And if you even know who's going to be there from the school, because you might have some adcoms, but you might also have local people. Like Maria, when you went, were you an adcom, or were you going as an alum?
No, I was just an alum, local representative. Very enthusiastic about the school. So
right. So that's also
that helped.
It helps a huge amount because you're excited about the school. It's contagious, right? So, but that also makes a difference for preparing to go, because if you're not, you want to be as present and as present as you can be, but that person isn't necessarily the same as an adcom that's going to be there, or a direct rep.
And I think if it helps allay some fears, I mean, it's not like this isn't your one shot this is not going to replace your actual application. If you win someone over and just wow them at this MBA fair, that doesn't automatically mean like, you're getting in. And conversely, if you kind of fumble a little, it's not like, oh, that's it, we're putting them on the negative list, the naughty list, and they're getting the lump of coal come admissions time. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. I think obviously if it's a admissions officer, you are going to want to perhaps, at least be prepared. I think to Eric's question about how to prepare, not just with your elevator pitch, but also I think go into these fairs having at least a general sense of what is it you want out of the MBA. So if you want to get into, say, consumer packaged goods or entrepreneurship or whatever that is, that way, if you go to the schools that you're interested in, if you look up in advance and you say, oh, here's a few schools that I think are kind of neat, look up what their offerings are. So that way you can ask really targeted questions when you meet with them. And conversely, maybe some schools that you're, just becomes more of a serendipitous moment. You walk by and you're like, hey, I'm really interested in consumer packaged goods. And if that school happens to be a place like Wisconsin, which is one of the best schools in the country, they'll say, well, it just so happens that not a lot of people know this, but we are actually amazing at this. And so at least that way, if you know what you want out of the MBA in general, you can at least research the offerings of the schools you are interested in and learn more about schools that you may not know as much about and find out quickly whether or not they are the right fit for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Bara, to speak about your thoughts on online MBA fairs or virtual MBA fairs, a lot have gone virtual. One of the ones we really love is Center Court. Center Court is run by John Burns from Poets and Quants and my good friend Matt Simmons from Fortuna Admissions. And it's a great fair. It's always, all of our students always have great things to say about the fair. And this morning I was actually talking with Matt about any notable things about the Center Court. And, you said like, who may be there? And I think the thing to think about is you could really get some strong nuggets of wisdom from these MBA fairs. So like one of the things Matt and John really prefer is, and they enjoy, is if, people who are attending the fairs actually send them questions in the private chat. And of course they ask the guests. So Matt said that, last year somebody said, hey, imagine, they were asking Kirsten Moss, GSB director last year. They basically said, hey, imagine we're creating like the most delicious Italian dessert. What are the key ingredients? Like maybe salt's important, but the sugar is really important. And Matt presented the question to her. And Matt told me that she gave like the most beautiful, like most perfect response to everybody. Like you want to come to GSB, this is the recipe, ladies and gentlemen. Take notes, right? So sometimes I get the impression people, they say, we're going to this or that. And, it's kind of just the necessary sort of lip service, but it doesn't have to be. And that's not the goal by any means of, people are not going just to go. Admissions directors and university folks are there for a reason, and as are the applicants. So I think you get some real value from these, whether it's online, virtual, or in person. You can really get some information that could help you and help everybody else. So yeah, I love the fact that you don't have to actually fly to, Miami or take the bus into downtown DC to attend. You can do the virtual fairs if you like.
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, there were one or two companies that were starting to get into the online fair thing, trying to capitalize on the technology there and reach people that may not be able to come to events. But obviously, COVID was an accelerator in every domain, and tech was the means to do it. In-person fairs are pretty much impossible, as we're taking GMAT on site at one moment. And so all fairs were online. Now, what I'm seeing is the big players in MBA fairs, master's fairs, and so forth, it's about 50-50, more or less. They're still keeping some online component to reach those people that were not, they weren't able to reach prior. But not only the candidates, but also the schools like that in-person interaction. They'd rather get on a plane and go far and pay for the flight, the hotel, food, taxi, all that stuff, and have that in-person experience to make that connection, which is a challenge to do online. So there's kind of extra things you need to do, like learning to make eye contact, which is a little bit awkward, right? Like when you're staring at a screen, like right now I'm looking at the camera lens, which appears like I'm looking at you. But now if I'm looking at the person like Bara, I'm looking at Bara right now, it looks like I'm looking down. So little tricks like that to be more present. What you guys are saying, because to sum it up in 3 words, is do your homework, right? Which means getting, probably your resume prepared, having some things you can say about yourself, like goals and aims, having your elevator pitch, or I think one of you said 3-sentence thing that you can prepare to say, or a 30-second pitch, and also a little bit of research on the schools. It's like you don't want to make the rookie mistake of like showing up in an MBA fair and I'm here to learn stuff. Whereas like many of the people that are there are going to have already looked on the websites of the schools that they're thinking about, and have a baseline of information. So they're not asking questions like, what's your minimum GMAT score, or are you guys in France? Like, like you can ask some deeper questions that show that you care, that you're mature, that you're motivated, and have the wherewithal that like, yeah, the website has been built for you to do your homework in advance. And that opportunity that could be 5 minutes, could be 30 minutes, whatever it may be, that you have a chance to talk to some of those school reps and alumni and so forth, are used more valuably, right? I think that's key, and that's a good way to really stand out. Also wanted to mention some things to watch out, like leading up to events, because you may find that a lot of the schools are offering, like where you are locally, either coffee chats or cocktails, like alumni cocktails and so forth. And this is a great way to get additional information and really network. I don't know if you guys have seen that in the places where you're located in Miami, in Maria, I forget where you're coming from, sorry. In Bangalore, Krithika, and so forth. Have you seen these kind of things, alumni cocktails, coffee chats?
Yeah, because the admissions officer is flying out to that city for a limited number of days. And so they do try to wrap things up together and mush it all together to make the most of that trip. So yeah, so be on the lookout. That's a great point. If there is an MBA fair coming, especially the ones like in the late summer, there's a really good chance that there will also be a separate information session, or like you mentioned, coffee chats with alumni or what have you.
Yeah, I think it depends on the school, but the timing, budget and so forth, what they might have the opportunity to do. But some of the more popular schools will do that either because they have a big alumni base in that local area, or because they're quite, how can I say, in demand. So they just don't have enough time at the event. So they'll create an additional event where they can have more, screen time with people or FaceTime with people.
Yeah. Right. So add to your point here, Eric, I had to say that some of the people, like most MBA aspirants, this might be the first time where they're getting a taste of networking and how it's to be done, where you go prepared with what you want. And of course, you are sharing it with the others in the right manner. And it's not always about like a take relationship, but it's more of like what you can give to somebody. So I feel that this is like, whenever you go to any fair, whether it's virtual or the real MBA fair, it's like your a networking 101 for them for the first time. And to add to perspective for especially international students, from that perspective, I should say that it is really very helpful for them to differentiate between the offerings of multiple schools. And I should say that some of the popular schools are literally like, the admissions rep gets surrounded by them, like, and it's like and then some of them are not so popular. But what it does, like, and I would say that, to add to that is one story that I wanted to share was, in typically when you find like all these people surrounding a rep, one person would get like a maximum attention is the one who ask intelligent questions instead of saying like, oh, does Berkeley Haas have a component in sustainability, or asking things that you can literally find from the internet. Okay, but the one person who asked a couple intelligent questions would stand out, right? So literally, like, this happened when this was around a school, and you could literally see everybody else turn to this person because they all knew that this was something very important, and this person really had made a mark. So I would say that you would have so many opportunities to create that impression. And also, you should leverage LinkedIn, in the sense that most of the adcoms are definitely present on LinkedIn, with the QR codes and other things. And you could do that even more instead of business cards these days. So that is also there. And I want to do one last plug-in for AGAC Applicant Fair, where we were able to bring in about like 27 schools, especially from the top B schools across the world. And the advantage of that was that this was pretty much early on in the process. Therefore, people could get like an extra early advantage of meeting with adcoms and getting ready for the summer.
Do we have a date on that for the AGAC applicant fair?
Typically, it happens around May and June. So we're yet to see how it's going to go for this year.
All right, we'll talk about that in a future episode of MBA Waves, for sure. Okay, what about some do's or don'ts on the day or the evening of the event? What advice would you guys have to offer? Like, it's D-Day, right? And some things you may want to do or not do to be a good or standout applicant.
One thing I always tell people, which surprises many of them, is play your best game, be genuine. I think it should be obvious, but right, I think so often we're looking at what other people are doing and how other people are presenting themselves. Your best asset is your own uniqueness and your own story and your own path to where you've come to. And I think that's really important to remember, is that it is a human connection between people. I mean, even when a school is selecting a candidate, yeah, it might be at a deep distance, but it is still an interpersonal transaction, right? It's a connection between two people. Someone's saying this person would be a good fit for the school. So be genuine and be your most genuine, sort of credible self. Like, you don't have to worry about anybody else there. You have your own story, you have your own strengths, interests, weaknesses, your own personality. Too often I see people, they're almost like reading other people's debriefs or whatever it is, and they're almost trying to fit into a mold. And it's almost, and I have nothing against plastic surgery, but it almost feels like plastic surgery, like we're all sort of converting to the mean, right, of like whatever aesthetics we're looking for. And I say, what God gave you and where you're at is like your best strengths. I said, so don't worry about it. Just be yourself. Like, it's not as scary as it seems. Like, look, we're just people making a connection, forming a relationship, right? And there's going to be many people who like you and some people who don't. Who cares? Let the people who don't like you go along their way, and the people who do, that's your tribe and your people. And I said, it's good to know both. So I always tell people, like, play your best game. Don't worry about what other people are doing. And I always tell them to be credible. I think that's maybe a mistake people make is sometimes, I say, look, you have to put yourself on the other side of the coin. So, like, for example, if you said you really loved, medical missions, right? You loved helping people. You had leadership experience, helping NGOs in Nicaragua put, surgical equipment on the ground. Well, does your story support that? So when someone looks at your resume, looks at your background, have you done this to the degree that supports the story? And I said, if no, that's okay, but let's not oversell this point, right? Let's got to be credible. I said, the admissions directors and the people there have a pretty good sense of credibility and what's BS, what's fluff. I said, so you can actually use credibility as a competitive advantage for yourself. Like, let's keep it right between the goalposts. Let's not understate it. Let's not overstate it. Let's be very accurate sort of about your accomplishments. So those are a few things that I always say to our people.
So being authentic and being credible.
Yeah.
That's good advice for sure. Maria?
Yeah, I just to build on that, like this idea of they have a type or they have a thing they want to hear, and if I say that magic password, alakazam, everything's going to open for me. Like, and that's not how it goes. And Scott, when you were saying just now about how people say, well, I saw online that this person had this background, and so I'm not that person, so should I try to be more like that person? Well, the fact is that seat's already filled. So if that person at the school, they got into that school, all the more reason for you to not be like that person, especially if they got in an earlier round, because it's like, well, that seat, we already have the seat for the private equity in renewable energy person. So don't worry about being that person. Business schools thrive on diversity, not just because it's some sort of politically correct buzzword, but because the classroom environment is where you're going to learn so much. And if everyone in the room had the exact same background, it would be an echo chamber instead of an actual learning environment. So don't worry about looking over your shoulder at what everyone else is doing. I do think it's beneficial in general in admissions to have a sense of whether or not you're competitive on a broader level, like the GMAT score or what have you. But in terms of the details of the story, only you have your own story. And also to the BS detector, some people are like, oh, like Krithika mentioned Haas and sustainability. If someone goes up to Haas at an MBA fair and is like, sustainability, I'm all about sustainability. And that person's like, great, so tell me about what you've done with electrovoltaic cells or something, and the person's like, oh, I don't know. Like, it's going to come out pretty quickly that you were just sort of making that up to sound good. And you have to have some actual substance to it, some evidence that this is really who you are. So just be yourself, and just be polite also.
Oh yeah, people who work in admissions, I think, have some of the best BS detectors in the world. They read tens of thousands of essays, references, CVs, and so on, interviews, and they get pretty good at detecting inauthenticity and fluff. So yeah, absolutely. What about dress code? Attending an MBA fair or even online, hopefully, you're not going to be one of those stories who forgets you don't have pants on and stands up in front of the camera. But a little bit more specifically, Maria just checked she's got her pants on.
All good.
But seriously though, showing up at an MBA fair, what's the typical dress code, if there's one?
I would dress business. I would dress business casual at the minimum, but at least business. You're still making a first impression. It is a business event. It is a formal event. This is not the place to show up with your tattered jeans and your concert T-shirt.
And pairing that with the
I would say, go to the fairs. So sorry. I would say go to the fairs the same way you would go visit the business school.
Yep.
Yeah, look the part, and if you don't feel the part, fake it till you make it, right? And this is a place where you could look at the internet for advice, right? I mean, if you don't own a suit, I don't know, go to GQ, look, I don't know, find some stuff, go help some, set you up. Yeah, it should look nice.
Yeah, I mean, generally the rule anywhere is usually you can't overdress for something, but you probably a full tuxedo is with tails is probably not what you want to show. That'd be unforgettable. You don't want to show up in ripped up jeans, a hoodie, the Pink Floyd T-shirt, and all that kind of stuff. Krithika says you dress the same way you'd visit campus. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the same way you dress to work. However, work culture, and sorry about the sirens in the background, has evolved. And I know stereotypically perhaps in Silicon Valley, there's often a very casual work dress code. I don't know if Bara has something to chime in, being from nearby the Bay Area. But yeah, you definitely want to go business casual, and keep it professional, because it is a professional event. Now, if you're in a circumstance say something's happened and you've spilled something in your clothes, you don't have time to get home, and all you have is whatever it is you happen to have, you can acknowledge it. I say the same thing about being unprepared for a meeting. If you Maria had said something about a serendipitous moment where you end up speaking to a school rep from a school you had no plans to speak to and had nothing prepared. I think acknowledging, and it goes back to Scott's point about being authentic. If you didn't, it was a surprise that you're coming to the event, a surprise that you're talking to the school, or you had something happen where you can't dress the part properly, just acknowledging from the beginning, say, hey, I'm sorry, this and this happened. I didn't have a chance to come home, but I really wanted to meet with you. And I think that really hits home. They're seeing that you've made this a priority, and that it's that important for you to take the opportunity to speak at that school, despite imperfect circumstances. So being authentic in this way as well is a good idea, I think.
Yeah, and that can be extremely memorable. For example, I mean, maybe you say, hey, we have our quarterly team meeting and everyone is there, and I wanted to run out for just 15 minutes. I just wanted to say hello to you. I'm so sorry, I'm in Gene, whatever. You could just be like, hey, I made the effort to come here. I wanted to say hello, apologize the attire. I wanted to shake your hand and say hello, even if it's for 5 minutes. So please excuse me. It's just something, it could even be a positive at that point.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the overarching lessons is just admissions officers are people too. Like they have spilled the marinara sauce on themselves as well. They have, they've been working from home in sweatpants for the past 2 years as well. They've been laid off. I remember once Amanda Carlson at Columbia once said at an AGAC conference, Krithika, I don't know if you remember this. She mentioned that she had gotten laid off earlier in her career herself before she went into admissions. And so she was not, sometimes people are like, oh God, I lost my job. And that means I'm never getting into business school. And it's like, these are not people who live in a little cave of business school admissions land. Like these are real people who've had real lives. And they've had real things happen to them, whether it's something minor like a stain on a shirt or something more major. So just keep that in mind when you're talking to them, or even when you're writing your essays or anything. Like these are not robots or big judges on high on the mountain staring down at you trying to find fault.
One thing to combine with what you guys are all saying is that they might have the marinara sauce. You might want to try to get the marinara sauce off of you. But you also, like the night before, have your clothes ready. Try not to come the next day. Like if you have that quarterly meeting that Scott's talking about, come resourced, have a good breakfast or lunch, have a good sleep, like really do your best to just get your whole self in the prime position to meet other people and to present the best that you can. So however you resource, don't do anything weird, like don't quit smoking, don't break up with anyone right beforehand, like really try to have everything be as normal as possible the night before and then when you show up. But also I think it's really great when people really tell you what's going on with them. An intern just applied to work with us and her resume talks about her taking care of her grandmother who has dementia, right? And it's on her resume. And the first thing I wrote to her was like, I'm so glad you shared with me about your grandmother. Like that's probably the most important work you could possibly do. And I would love to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, set yourself up for success. Avoid any snags by thinking ahead, like laying out your suit, as you said. But if the thing does happen, like, be real. And as Maria said, they're looking down on you. That image is pretty funny. A couple of things that I wanted to mention that you might encounter at an MBA fair, other components to the actual event, the main fair part. Like very often there are individual school presentations, or there's an opportunity for a school to have like usually a block of like 20, 30 minutes where they have your full attention, and the room may be limited. So you might want to think about, okay, do I get there soon? Especially for some of the more sought after schools. But usually this is an opportunity where you can ask questions. Like I think Maria was saying, you don't want to like bogart too much, like monopolize too much the time of an admissions person by asking a lot of questions. But these rooms are an opportunity to ask an intelligent question. And you're able to do that by having done research and not being like, are you in France? And they're like, clearly in Canada. Those are an opportunity to get deeper information about a school, but obviously in a group format. Another thing you might often see are panels. Usually this is a mix of different school reps, and the focus is not about any one of those particular schools. Usually it is about general information. This is a great opportunity to learn a lot of insights that you might find from admissions coaches like Maria, myself, Scott, Krithika. Questions about like how to approach the GMAT, or what about some nuanced differences between the resume or CV? Even the name has a difference, depending on the country you're applying to. ideas about references, like some tips about going how to go about getting good references, talking about like fluff, right? Having somebody that really knows you well, knows you professionally. Some tips about the GMAT. This is Bara's world. Or TOEFL. Like, do you need a TOEFL if you've lived in the UK before? Those kind of general questions. So you don't want to ask questions about the individual schools, even though the school rep is on that panel. It's not an appropriate moment to do so. And the other thing I wanted to mention is networking events. A lot of times, or not events, but at the event, there's often networking opportunities, either formally set up where it's like, okay, from this time to this time, it's specifically designated for networking. There may be like wine or Coke or juice or something provided to provide an opportunity for making conversation. But don't skip out on these. From my perspective as a former recruiter, I saw a lot of people would just like skip out on that part of the event. They'd see it at the schools and then they just go off. And I thought that was such a waste, because a lot of times there's alumni from various schools there. It's an opportunity to have a little bit like less formal conversations, like you're having a drink together, you get to ask them questions, like that's what they're there for. So it's kind of sets the tone for going deeper. And if it's an alum, like finding out, why they chose this school and what, how were the classes, what were the career services like, and what did this degree do for their career? And don't forget, at the end of that conversation, you want to ask, hey, can we connect on LinkedIn? Because it's a constant opportunity. Like every day is an opportunity to network. And, keeping that in mind, like to continue to add people on your LinkedIn, especially if they're school reps or alumni, like by the time you're applying, the admissions committees are looking at your LinkedIn, because they will, right? They're going to see that you're connected to all of these fantastic people. Like, oh, this person has done their homework. This person's serious and motivated and, knows things. So that's great. And the reason why that's super important is because they're not only thinking about you coming into their program and succeeding in their classes, but they're thinking about you coming out of the program and succeeding at getting a job. If you are demonstrating how good of a networker you are now, you're going to be an even better networker by the end of the program. You're going to have that much more potential in getting hired and being a successful alum that they can report in their career reports and statistics and so forth, which helps the school's ranking. And so it's a whole circular thing. For somebody who's not very good at at networking, somebody to whom networking doesn't come naturally, maybe more introverted people, it is a skill that you can learn. And it's something that you want to, for sure, invest time in developing, because those who are having trouble finding employment after an MBA program become kind of a liability for the school. It's like, this person's not found work. It's been 5 months since they've graduated. Doesn't look good for the schools. So that's why they want to see people who know how to network. And this is an opportunity to either practice or show your stuff, show what you got.
Yeah, it's interesting about networking, right? I mean, from my perspective, like the biggest thing people can do is take the mystery out of it. Again, you're just trying to form a genuine connection with somebody else. If you look at it like that, it can be very easy. Find some common ground, find what they're interested in, even make the conversation more about them, right? Learning about them. It's you almost can't go wrong, right? Yeah, it's great to share things about yourself too, but if you could really, meet another person where they're at and learn some new things about them, their interests, their hopes, their fears, whatever. I mean, that's networking, right? You don't have to go in with this grand design of like, oh, I'll get a job as the CFO by next week. I mean, start easy. And that's a great way to talk to people in a way that's very easy for them, very easy for you. People love talking about themselves. I mean, people always appreciate being asked about themselves. What are they doing? Oh, your grandma has dementia. I'm so sorry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think so much of this has to do with just bringing it back down to earth and just trying to form a personal connection with somebody without pretext or without, grand design, not fabricated, just super genuine.
Yes. Anyone else some tips about networking or other things?
I wanted to add one aspect here. I think sometimes working on an MBA application can be like a lonely ride. The reason being that you're doing this probably secretive from your workplace, and you're taking away all the time from your family and friends. You're not probably going to see them while you're working on GMAT, as Bara can definitely attest to it. But I feel that this is like the fairs, MBA fairs are one way for you to find like-minded MBA aspirants, and then also get some buddies on the way, so that you have people to go on this journey together. So it's not just connecting with schools and alums and of course the AdComs there, but and even like test prep companies, admissions coaches, etc. But it's also definitely to find your tribe of people who are also seeking the same thing, so that you can all like progress together.
Totally. Like other applicants at the fair could be like your study buddy for the GMAT. And who knows, you might be in the same program together. And even if you're not, you're going to hopefully both or all be graduating from MBA programs and potentially working at the same company together. So you never know. Like this is business. This is how it works, right? Absolutely.
Right. So the networking is not just with you and the adcoms and the alums, it's also with the people who are attending the fairs, potentially.
So true.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on like old school business cards? Like Krithika mentioned the QR code potential. Are they a faux pas these days? Do you like them? Are they still useful? What's your take?
I don't know that. I mean, if you have some, I guess take them with you, but I wouldn't like go out and get some printed up just for this.
Yeah.
That's my take, at least. I don't know. I think they might end up in the recycling bin at the end of the night.
At best.
I don't know. Scott, you were about to say something. Did you have a different view, or?
No, I think everyone can find their own sort of way of making it work, right? Yeah, whether that's digital or paper. Yeah, I think, I pretty much agree.
Speaking of paper, what about printing paper CVs? Resumes?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I like what you said a lot about LinkedIn. I think for sure, you have to have your LinkedIn up to speed. If you go into any digital event or not a digital event, people need to make sure their LinkedIn is well polished and well presented. And the good news is if you're struggling with how to do that, there's so many services out there today that can help you, make your LinkedIn a real asset in your application. Because Erica, as you said, and for sure they're checking that out. So I think that's sort of probably the bright line.
Yeah, and not only your LinkedIn, like, I don't know. I know a lot of adcoms, they'll just Google your name and see whatever comes up. Any social media platform. Because, if they're taking you into their cohort, you're assuming that brand. You're becoming part of that brand. And if you're just like, I'm just going to sum it up with a jerk, posting stuff, you represent that school. And same with the company. They're going to do the same thing. They want to see how you represent yourself online. You can become an extension of them. And that could be problematic if you're a jerk. So yeah, they're checking you out everywhere. So that might tapering your social media. Yeah, go ahead, Krithika. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. If I may quickly jump in here, I would say this is my first don't take your resume, especially like a paper resume, if you're not ready. It has to be like a regular, it has to be the impact-based business school resume and not like your regular one that you're using for your job application. So you don't really want to go unprepared. So this is my first don't for an MBA fair. I would say that, work on your resume, and when you're ready to show it to somebody, it should be at a level like, almost 95% done or something. And then only you should probably share it. That's my thoughts. What are other people's thoughts on it?
Yeah, I feel like if somebody were to try to hand me a resume, I would say like, well, that's what the application is for. So you will be giving us a resume at that point. I do think for the one-on-ones, you might have to bring one, but like, I think for some of those, but I think for the most part, for the typical fair with the booths and whatever, I mean, maybe have some just in case. But to your point, Krithika, I mean, given that the fairs are often prior to the deadlines, a lot of applicants have not really started working on their resumes. And as you wisely pointed out, the resume you use to apply to a job is not the same resume you use to apply to business school. So just because you have a resume doesn't mean it's the resume that you should be showing them. So I would actually almost hold off and, try to maybe link in or something like that so that they know who I am maybe, but I wouldn't. I don't know, unless you're a real early bird and you've already got that resume ready to go.
Well, our colleague Barbara Coward, I know, has gone to a bunch of different MBA fairs and has offered reading over people's resumes. So if the MBA fair has that as an option and you have an issue, that's a great opportunity to get that feedback.
Yeah.
Oh, if the fair is offering that, then sure, absolutely.
Definitely.
And by the way, that's why I said check out the website for the event that you're looking to attend, because they'll often list the various other services that will be going on there. So we've been talking about networking and meeting other people besides the adcoms. like there's a lot of resources for free. That's like something that I often do. Attending MBA fairs is like a free service, like just to do feedback, critique on CVs. It's usually like, sometimes there's a line out the door and I'm just doing them like 5-10 minutes max. But you can read them and scan them and give a lot of good feedback quickly. As Maria pointed out, there's a difference, I suppose, between the old school kind of fairs and the one-to-one meetings where you probably would want to have a resume. But as I said earlier, for the one-to-ones, usually you have to upload your CV in advance to their platform, so the schools have that.
Right.
But to Scott's point about helping people, you kind of opened up with that, like being of service or helping out people there. Sometimes the tech doesn't work, the internet's down, or the platform's broken, and be that hero that has a paper copy of your CV with you, so you can actually have that an effective meeting. So let me tell you, as a school rep, when you're trying to communicate with somebody and you don't have that CV or LinkedIn or anything, it's a lot harder to assess your profile. And so, yeah, I think it's useful to have a couple copies on you in the event that something like that happens in the context of a one-to-one, especially. Also, I wanted to mention a lot of the fair companies use a lot of tech these days. You might have some kind of badge or some kind of device that you're tapping or scanning or some barcode or whatever. It's evolved over the years. But you'll see that a lot, so don't be surprised if you have this kind of thing. And anyone that you speak to, whether it be a school rep or, I don't know, maybe like Bara's company, City Test Prep, might have a booth at an event if they asked to scan you, because that's kind of the policy that like they have to scan everyone they talk with. So that's kind of part of it.
Scott, does Target do a lot of these events?
No, we don't do any like MBA fair events.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we used to go to Center Court and we would do, we would be at like the Genius Bar. We would do like GMAT help for folks. Like a lot of people would have like a line around the corner. I remember in the San Francisco one a couple of years ago, back when it was, in person. Yeah, we probably had any one time like 30, 40 people ask, because, for so many folks out there, the GMAT is such a mystery and there's so much bad information.
Totally.
We would kind of talk with people in 15 minutes each and help them and give them some advice and stuff like that. Just Eric, as we were talking about with the resumes and stuff. So we do mostly participation in other events.
Yeah. So guys, I think that kind of wraps up the episode. We've been going for about an hour now with loads of great little nuggets of wisdom. And thank you so much for sharing. Any other final bits of advice you wanted to share with our audience before we wrap it up?
I think we covered this really well.
Yeah, it should be very helpful for people watching.
So I would just say that at least go to at least 1 or 2 fairs, because that's going to be a very easy way of getting your research done quickly. I know that MBA aspirants are pressed for time, so nothing like kicking off your research by just going to a fair, collecting all the lovely brochures out there, and then, of course, like all the connections and getting a head start.
It's a good point. Like, you plan on attending more than one, especially if you're early on in the process, because programs actually evolve over time. I remember when I was at ESSEC, there were some people that I would meet over the course of a couple of years because they were actually too young, like ineligible at that point, but they really were motivated by this program and wanted to follow it. And so I would see them like every 6 months or every year. But yeah, attending more than one gives you the opportunity to get in contact with multiple schools. Like at each event, there may not be the same schools represented. At a given event, I've seen anywhere between like 10 to like maybe 50 schools, some of the bigger ones. So it can range quite a bit. So, and there's, just looking at the Financial Times rankings, for example, that's 100 schools right there, and that is by no means the limit. So there's a lot of schools to check out. There's for sure the right program out for you, and an MBA fair is just one way, but a very important way to get to know the schools that are the best fit for you. So I want to thank everyone for your advice and wisdom and words today. It's been a great episode of MBA Waves. Don't forget to tune in next week, as always, on Tuesday, 7 p.m. Paris time, 1 p.m. New York time, and 10 a.m. San Francisco time. It's all about GMAT waivers and what schools to look out for. Thanks very much, and see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
day.